ergo PBs. I don't think you're one, known from the squad to have huge sort of PBs.
Yeah.
What were they for your 2K, 5K, and 30-minute rate training?
My 2K is 5:58.4. I think I'm quite far off that now. And I was the weakest in the Olympic team. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if I was the weakest out of all of the quads in the Olympics, because it's not a massive score. But I was also not the most massive athlete. So I was weighing in at the Olympic final, or on the Olympic finals day, I was 87.9 kilos. I remember that, doing my morning weigh-in that day. And so I was a smaller athlete, but also a weaker one. My 5K, my best was 15:43 point something, can't remember. And that one I was higher up the standard in the whole team, but still I was probably still in the slowest third, maybe quarter. But I definitely beat some people that beat me on the 2K. And the half hour, my PB was 140.3, so that was 8,960 something meters, which again, the standard in the national team is that everybody gets over 9,000 meters, so under 140. I just found that really tough. I found that really, really tough, and I don't really know why I couldn't do what they could do with that, but I did my best. I did my best score in that test when I was 19 years old and rowing at Leander. So when I went into the national team, I got worse at that test, which is, well, to be honest, I have my ideas of why, but I don't know why.
Okay. Do you want to explore those?
Yeah, I think it's because personally, I think the training for me was very hard in the national team, and I was, come Wednesday, by the time we did that test, when I did it at Leander, I'd probably done 5 sessions by then. But at the GB Rowing Team Centre, I'd already probably done 7 sessions in a week by then, and I'd done them whilst we were training at the national team. Everything felt like you were always being tested. Maybe you weren't, but you felt like you were. So a lot of the sessions for years, I think in hindsight, I did a little bit too hard. I don't think I was training in the correct training zones for most of the time I was there. I think I was training above them, and I think that meant that I was always fatigued and I wasn't targeting the correct energy systems in those sessions. And if I could go back and do it all again, I'd have done a lot of my training a little bit slower and a little bit more in the prescribed zones but that was difficult, because if I wasn't going at X split, people would be looking at me going, oh, why is Jack taking it easy, or why is Jack not pulling as hard as those guys and stuff. And I think a lot of coaches and athletes see what we call UT2 training as something you need to move on. And in hindsight, I just completely don't believe it is. You should never. There's not a standard of that. There's not a test. It's not a test. It shouldn't be anyway. If you're seeing it as that, I think it's wrong. I think it should be a means to build your aerobic capacity so that when you do your performances, you're better. And I kind of learned the hard way in my final year or so to take it easier, and I felt so much better. I didn't get sick at all. I missed 1 session out of the whole season, which was did more training than anyone in the team by training less hard, and then I got a silver medal at the end of it. So it was, well, that's my own little case study, but I think for 6 years I did it wrong, and I think that's why when I went over so I trained here and I was training in the right training zones and encouraged to. I went over there, I think, to be honest, I was encouraged to always go a little bit harder than a little bit lighter, and I think it slowed me down.
So your training zones that you're on, so the ones where you're doing a little bit harder, how many, for example, how many seconds on average, so say your 2K was 129, how many seconds more than that were you doing it on average when you were doing it a bit too hard, and then how many seconds on average were you doing it more when you were doing it right?
Yeah, so when I was doing it a bit too hard, I think, well, let's say you said it's 129, it's 129.8 or something, okay. Right? So almost 130. When I was doing it too hard, I was going at about between 147 and 149, so that's 20 or 19 to 22 seconds. No, 19 to 17 seconds.
Yeah.
Which I think is a bit too hard. And then when I was doing it right, I was going about somewhere between 151 and 152 and a half, which was, well, that's 22 to 23 seconds. And I think that was better. And to be honest, if I was training alone, I might have even gone a bit further. But I was trying to keep, do what was right for me, but also not seem to the team and coaches as though that I wasn't trying. And that was I think that's a balance that I think the team could get better still, actually. Another thing I think they might be able to improve, but towards Paris, is to actually go slower in the long things, to go faster in the fast things. I read some things during the lockdown, different studies and how different sports do things and what some rowing coaches around the world think, and they were suggesting maybe the correct functional training, or like UT2 training, would be somewhere between 50 and 55% of your 2K PB watts. And for me, that worked out between 149.5 and 153. And I'd always been training harder than the top end of that, which it's mad to look back on.
Yeah, and who was it that was prescribing you the splits? Was it the physiologists?
Well, no, they were never prescribed. That's the thing. They were never, or very rarely, and when they were prescribed at quite a high end of it.
Yeah.
Or like I'd be prescribed sort of 149.9 or something, which was, quite. If I looked to that scale, that was the top end of it. And sometimes we'd be prescribed if we're like lactic acid training zones, where they said a maximum of, you wanted to be under 2 millimoles of lactic acid per litre of blood, I think it is.
Yeah.
But actually, if I was above it, I wouldn't know until after I'd done the session. So I started to use heart rate in the last year or so of training, but again, we were never really set heart rate zones. This Garmin told me what my heart rate zone should be based off what I worked out my max was. And I wonder whether it was, once I started to use heart rate for my training, I felt a lot better and I came on a lot.
Yeah, no, interesting. I think, like, for me, it was always really frustrating not to know what UT2 I should actually be doing.
Yeah.
When you test, you go as hard as you can. But when you aren't supposed to be going hard, like, what actually should you be doing? Yeah,
it was a shot in the dark. And how crazy to think that we were spending years shooting in the dark.
Yeah.
Whilst we weren't utilising the sports science knowledge that is there.
Yeah.
I just think of cycling teams and stuff when some of the people I've spoken to have had much more prescriptive power to train at, or heart rate to train at, or this sort of things. We just kind of went and did it, and then wrote it down, sent it in to put it in a spreadsheet, and felt like you've been ranked for it. Yeah, it is frustrating, that.
Yeah. And one thing I do with my own athletes is it is a bit of a balance. They will have absolutely prescribed splits when they kind of do their training sessions, but Hamish Bond wrote a great article when he was kind of training with his 8 for Tokyo when they did win gold, and because I think they have a much more vigilant system over there in terms of following prescribed heart rate and splits, and I think that got them so far. But in order to get those like last bits of those final bits of better performance, you needed to kind of let go. But I think, well, I'm shooting in the dark a little bit here, but it was during those test pieces, like you suggested, it's not going hard sort of all the time.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think like sometimes if you're in a boat, there's a balance. When you're on the ergo, or in a single, you can train to yourself. And when you're in a boat, sometimes you have to squeeze it on a little bit more just to make it feel good as well and get the right, cohesion.
Yeah.
But not every session.
Yeah.
I think that's where I went wrong, and I think partly I wish I'd been a bit guided a bit better with it, and not been just left to keep making the same mistake. But also I maybe should have learned myself was just that not every session has to be the one that makes you win. Mm-hmm. It's like I always felt like every session is like, right, I've got to go smash this, and by doing that I often just dug myself in a hole. It's just weird.
Yeah.
But it's easy to do because you want to win.
Yeah.